5 C's for identifying a fit between a pastoral candidate on the one hand and a local church on the other. And where did they come from? Well, the first 3 C's in this setup came from Bill Hybels' book, Courageous Leadership, where Bill talks about the 3 principles he uses to hire anyone that comes from outside of Willow Creek Community Church. Bill says the most important thing to hiring anyone, and for that person being hired to identify, is chemistry. When they walk in the room, are they the kind of person that you would want to spend personal time with? I realize no matter how gifted a pastor is, or no matter how healthy a church is, if there's not enough innate, created chemistry between the candidate and the calling church, the relationship will eventually break, and it won't leave anyone in a good place. And so the first thing to kind of identify and wrestle with is there enough chemistry between myself and you to make this calling work? The second C that Bill Hybels looks at is character. We've all seen and heard countless stories of moral fallouts in pastors' lives and how injurious that is, not just to the local church, but to these men and their families. And so it's my prayer and my hope that as you're wrestling with all the different candidates you're considering, that you look at the character and you make sure that this is a person who is walking in the grace and strength and holiness that Christ provides. And I pray that you would see that in my life and in my family's stories and in the way God has carried us through good and bad times. The last C that Hybels looks at is competency. And this is when you begin to look at pastoral sermon samples, theological papers, different kinds of program areas they directed. What were the trends, what were the measurables, the metrics of growth, the maturation in their ministry and in their discipleship. That's a very difficult and tedious process. In addition to Bill Hybels' 3 C's, though, I noticed that there were 2 things that I felt were lacking, that were missing. And those 2 things were content and context. Now, in content, I think it's really important for you as a church that as you look at a pile of 20 or 200 resumes, that you're raising theological questions. What does this candidate believe? Does his vision and his pastoral philosophy fit us as a church? And so I've put up some different papers on my website to help you identify that, and I hope as we get a chance to talk more and more that we're going to be able to identify that and find a connection and a fit there. You'll notice that if you scroll down on the page that on this section that I write, I say that I believe in a both-and gospel. I take that from Tim Keller, and basically all I'm trying to say is that I believe the gospel is definitely about the life, death, resurrection of Christ, his penal substitutionary atonement for us, that without his sacrifice we would be nothing. But I also believe that in the gospel, God is announcing the good news that in Christ's life, death, and resurrection, new creation has started. And that is good news for everything, for every social sphere, for creational spheres. And so I believe in a both-and gospel when it comes to content. And everything I do in terms of my ministry and how I identify evangelism flows out of that both-and gospel, where I realize on the one hand we are radically sinful, but on the other hand, our creation, our society, our culture, there are a host of systemic evils that need to be confronted and engaged with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We need salvation, our culture, our creation needs redemption, and it will come in an already not yet fashion. It's been announced, he is risen, and let us live the resurrection in community as individuals. The last piece is context. Now you'll notice that I mentioned that I have served in about every context out there, and so I hope that after you look at all 5 pieces together, you will be able to identify fit, and I thank you for your time in considering it.